What does it mean to be called to something? We hear that phrase pop up in everyday life in different ways. For instance, they really found their calling. Or if someone is good at something and chooses to do something else, we say that they missed their calling. It's something of a generational phrase, though. As I look to some of the younger folks here this morning, that's probably not something they talk about with their friends a whole lot. Like, what are you called to? What's your calling, right? Tends to be a little bit of an older phrase. And it's one that doesn't get used a ton, I think, especially as I just kind of hang out with my own kids and their friends. But I also don't think that it's an accident that the younger folks who don't use it as much don't really have as much of a sense of purpose and meaning, I think, as they would like at times. I really kind of had an eye-opening and a little bit of a disturbing discussion with my son last week as he was talking about water cooler conversation at work. And if I were to say to you, what do folks talk about at work? You know, there would be a wide variety of responses, but there's typical things that get talked about around the water cooler, right? Like the Steelers game, what happened with the last sporting event, things that might be upcoming, or complaining about stuff at work. You know, there's just a set list of things that folks like to talk about when they gather together. And we were talking about that, and my son said, "Do you know what we talk about at work?" I said, "What?" He said, "We talk about how much life is pointless and that we really are struggling finding purpose in anything." Now, I initially thought he was kind of joking, right? Like, it can't be that bad, right? Well, it is. That is what they talk about where he works. The fact that none of them feel like they have a purpose and that they are just keeping their heads above water, trying to find a reason to continue from one day to the next. That is a shocking indictment of the world in which we live, where so many people are having such a difficult time finding any reason at all to put one foot in front of the other. Now, to be fair, this struggle for meaning is not just something that's challenging for young people. I think for many societal reasons, it's especially challenging for them, but it faces all the rest of us too, right? The many changes of life that we all face, like retirement or the loss of a loved one or children growing up, can leave us feeling like we've lost our purpose, that the motions of our daily life have been stripped of meaning and purpose that they once used to have. Now, there are plenty of secular books out there and plenty of life coaches that will try to sell you on a program for finding your higher purpose. Some of those books and some of those life coaches are actually pretty good. The problem is this: any meaning that you find that does not include God's purpose for your life is a Band-Aid. It's a temporary fix that can and will be washed off by the chaos and the changes of our lives. Our gospel today shares a call story as Andrew crosses paths with Jesus in the company of John the Baptist. Andrew, in turn, connects his brother Peter with Jesus. From other gospel accounts that share this call story a little bit differently, we know that Peter and Andrew were fishermen. Now remember, this wasn't a hobby or a pastime for them. Like, my grandpa would have considered himself a fisherman. He wasn't a fisherman, he was an architect, no matter how much of a fisherman he thought he was. These were fishermen who fed themselves and fed their families and kept a roof over their heads by catching fish. It's likely what they would have called their purpose before they met Jesus. Just 3 years later, they would describe their purpose, their source of meaning, in very different words. What can we take away from this? Primarily this morning, I think we need to remember not to confuse who we are with what we do, and what we do to pay our bills, and what we do to pass the hours. If we are both blessed and lucky, then our day jobs may overlap in some way with our true purpose, but that isn't true of every season of our lives. Remember that who you are this morning is a child of God and a follower of his Son. I know that sounds like a little churchy, right? Like the priest stands up here at the pulpit and says, remember, you're a child of God and a follower of his Son, and that needs to be what's at the center. But it actually isn't churchy. It's just the truth. If who you are in Jesus stands at the very center of your sense of self, then that is where your meaning and your purpose will flow from. It doesn't matter what your day job is or used to be. Titles, degrees, professional honors, the rest of it just become unimportant niceties. The harsh words and judgments of others just become flies that you can swat away. So many of those things that cause us anxiety and keep us up at night don't have to if we identify ourselves properly. If we find our truest sense of identity, who we are in God's love for us in Christ. You don't need a theology degree or a fancy book to learn how to do this, how to put Jesus at the center of who you are. It's kind of simple, actually. Just talk to him and listen, and then try to love. It really is just as simple as that. In fact, you're doing it right here this morning. As you hear his word proclaimed and you get ready to receive his body and blood, you've taken some time away from your week to put Jesus at the center of who you are. What we have to remember is to kind of continue that pattern through the rest of the week. And this kind of peace, this kind of identity and purpose is something that cannot ever be taken away from us. Death can't take it away from us. Changes in job, retirement, kids growing up and moving away, the loss of loved ones, none of that can move us to our very core when Jesus is there. When our truest sense of who we are is found in God's love for us. We gain an unshakability that stands as an example to others in the world who are gathering around water coolers this week and wondering if there is any reason to continue with life.